Ready?
Yeah. Yes, I'm ready.
So let's do this. Okay. Yeah. Right, here we go. Hello, I'm Tara Brabazon. I'm the Dean of Graduate Research at Flinders University, and welcome to Vlog 30. Gordon, 30 vlogs, and we're calling this one the Engagement Matrix. Now, as you can tell, I'm not in Adelaide. I'm in Paisley in Scotland, and I bring you greetings from this truly wonderful small city in this truly wonderful small nation. I'm visiting the University of the West of Scotland for many reasons. It's a wonderful place, there's a lot of innovation here, lots of best practice here, but one of my dear mates, who I so very, very rarely see, is at this university, and he's very posh. Look at the gear. He's very famous and he's got an amazing job at this university, but more of Gordon shortly. I'm actually here, and one of the reasons I'm here is because this vlog is via request from one of our PhD students, Carrie. Carrie is a PhD student in the faculty of Medicine, Nursing and Health Sciences, and she wanted me to talk about how we make our research relevant beyond the university. How do we build what she called an engagement matrix? So Gordon, what she was worried about is how does she link up what she called real world values and academic practicalities? Can you see why I'm here? Mm-hmm. So Carrie, I've travelled halfway around the world to deliver this vlog to you and to introduce you to my dear mate Gordon Hunt. Gordon is the head of external engagement at the University of West of Scotland. There are 4 campuses: Ayr, Paisley, Hamilton, Dumfries. Am I right?
You are, and London.
And I heard we're moving to a London campus as well.
Yeah.
Absolutely astounding. So it is a growing and burgeoning campus. He's held so many roles through his career for the decades that I've known you. It's unbelievable. But he's also chair of the Scottish Library and Information Council. So it's all happening. This man is amazing. How are you, Gordon?
I'm very well, thank you, Tara. It's good to see you again after far too long.
Oh, you're looking fantastic too. Now, first question, and it was a mystery to me. How does an outstanding librarian become the head of external engagement at a university? How does that happen?
It kind of happens by a weird process of osmosis where you get kind of asked to do things. So it kind of happens in universities. So I was happily going along as university librarian and then got a call from our previous deputy principal to say, how did I fancy being campus director of our new Ayr campus? Right. And that, I guess, is about the way that you do things within your role and how you perform in the university. There was no looking back from that really, because having done that, I got involved in all sorts of different activity about what the university is and what it does in a particular community. Then I had a short spell standing in for our director of planning, who went to Australia on sabbatical for a while and didn't come back.
Sorry about that.
It happens, you know. And although planning definitely wasn't my forte in terms of my long-term career, I don't have the right kind of mind for the statistics and that kind of thing. But it was a really useful experience in terms of understanding how the university works and getting wider connections.
Yes.
So then when our current principal, Craig Mahoney, arrived and did all his process of change, which is really challenging us to be a different kind of university and to move forward into a new model of what a 21st century university can be. Part of that restructure carried the opportunity to create this new department and bring together lots of different external engagement activities, and by external engagement we really mean partnership.
Yes.
So, and I think that begins to answer the question about how do we do this. It's about partnership, it's about how you relate to your communities. To relate that back to being a librarian, and we've talked about this a lot with colleagues of mine in the profession who've also ended up doing kind of weird and wonderful things. It's about the transferable skills, and fundamentally we're about people and about partnership and about collaboration. Librarians collaborate better than many other people. And so we see the opportunities for collaboration. And so in a way, everything that I do, even if it's mainly not about libraries anymore, is still about how do we work with somebody else? How do we become greater than the sum of the parts? And that's very much the ethos that I was trained up in as a librarian. So there is at the back of it a kind of logic about the skill set that we carry into a different area.
And also, you've always been so optimistic and buoyant, and I hope what our postgraduate students also gain from your story, Gordon, is the importance of saying yes. When an opportunity comes up, say yes, have a go, rather than go, oh look, is that my skill set? I wasn't trained for that.
Absolutely, and one of the things I always say I still do a bit of occasionally talking to library students and so on, and it's not relating to library students. My philosophy is always, with all the jobs that I've done, always go for something that you're 80% sure you can do, but with 20% you're not sure you can do, because that's the leap in the dark that makes it interesting. When I was asked to look at becoming interim director of planning, wow, was that scary. It's kind of like all of a sudden you're responsible for liaising with the funding council, you're responsible for all kinds of stuff. And actually just being prepared to say, I'll give it a go, I'll try and learn as I go along, be prepared to learn. And to learn from the people that you work with, because one of the great things about my development here has been some of the fantastic managers I work with and senior staff that I work with as well, where I've learned as I've gone along how to deliver what they want and what they need to help the university progress. So you're constantly learning, but the main thing is be prepared. If you want to do something interesting and exciting, you've got to be prepared to say, not 100% sure how I'm going to do that, but I'll give it a whirl and I'll learn on the job.
Yeah, and I mean, I always say to our PhD students, feel the fear and do it anyway.
Absolutely.
Feel the fear and do it anyway. And also, great lesson for our students too about working in what would be called a smaller university campus, because the capacity to move between roles is also greater.
Yeah, and I think that point about the answers yes, which is a philosophy that the principal's very keen on, and we try and develop. I mean, as our principal says, sometimes it's yes, but it's still yes. And I think my whole team, we try to come from the point of view of saying there's got to be a way we can achieve this. We might want to reshape it, we might want to suggest a different way of doing it, but we're always, I don't believe there's any organisation that we can't work with as a university. There's got to be a way we can work with people, because fundamentally we're a public good and we must be able to deliver that. Finance can be an issue, the way you administer something can be an issue. There's all sorts of issues out there that will get in the way.
Yes.
But there's got to be a way at one level or another where we can have an impact. So at the end of the day, it's just trying to find ways of doing it. And even on the days when we all, I'm the same as everybody else. You get an email in, and sometimes I'll get an email and I think, oh, that's just not what I'm here to do. I don't really. But then what I try and do with that is kind of take that deep breath, go and have a coffee, come back and look at it and think, well, actually, there is something in there. It's maybe not quite what the person's saying, but we can twist it around a bit. We can develop it into something, or we can pass it on to somebody.
Yeah.
And I think getting that philosophy that, where universities get bad reputations is if something just disappears. So somebody contacts you and says, we've got this great idea for a project or whatever, and I don't like to hear when I'm out talking to partners them saying, well, we did contact the university about that and nobody got back to us. And that, even if the discussion takes it somewhere different, just having that response, having that kind of, we're here and we're listening and we're engaged. We're engaged. Now we might be saying that we can't really do anything with that unless there's cash involved, because sometimes there has to be.
Indeed.
But nevertheless, and again, I think that's something that we get from the library's background, is the kind of problem solving and the understanding people's needs, understanding what they're looking for,
and
listening and doing that kind of, everything for me. When I was being trained as a librarian, I was trained in the reference interview, and you could argue that everything flows from the reference interview. Everything flows from, I need to understand what you need, not necessarily what you want, but what you need, because the need's the important thing. Sometimes people will say, I want X, and then when you unpick it, you think, well, no, you don't really. You need this. You thought you wanted that. The classic. It's the classic. I want a library card, but actually, what you need is access to a particular resource or whatever. So we might give you a library card, but really, what you're after is that. And sometimes we don't. None of us always know what it is that underlying what we're trying to do. So in a way, what we're trying to unpick with our potential partners is, what is it that you need that we can support you with? And often you didn't know you needed it, or you didn't know you needed us. And it's one of the things I often say when I meet new people in the university. because of the kind of role that we're doing, we're not necessarily the first people on the list when new people are inducted, because they think you have to meet the head of finance, you have to meet the head of HR, you have to meet all these other people. And what I often do when I kind of contact people is say, you don't know why you need to meet me yet, but let me come and have a coffee with you, and you'll come to understand why you might need to meet me.
See, this is a great model for Australia. I come on these wonderful trips to obviously see you and listen and learn, and I've learned so much today already, and this is a very important model, I think, for Australia to think through. Because in Australia, Gordon, at the moment, there's a lot of talk about industry engagement. The phrase is used a lot, the triple helix, so industry, government, universities. But what I did find out when I was doing my research on you is you've been very involved in the Ayrshire Chamber of Commerce and Industry, and also Paisley First, which of course is one of my big interests, the Paisley Business District Improvement Scheme.
Yes.
Yeah? Now, tell me about university and business relationships. How do we make them real and authentic and powerful rather than cliched?
Interesting one. I mean, I don't honestly think we have the solution to that yet. So I think I'm not coming out and saying, well, here's the model of how you do it.
Bummer.
So I think there are some interesting challenges there. Yeah, I mean, it works on several levels, and I think that we've got the stuff that most universities do, which is great. So we've got the spin-off and spin-out companies, we've got business incubation, we've got kind of working with innovation vouchers, as we would call them here, and knowledge transfer partnerships, all of which there's funding for. And my colleagues in enterprise do that kind of work, and we actually have, I think, more knowledge transfer partnerships than almost any other university in Scotland. So there's really good stuff happening there. But I think the one that we're working particularly with in engagement, you've put your finger on there, is the business improvement districts and the chambers of commerce.
Huge.
What you might call the softer business relationships, because my colleagues in enterprise will do the hard business relationships. So I'll say, right, where's the cash? How can we help you get cash? How can we help you do all of that? What we are beginning to get into now is, you've got a business improvement district, which is local traders trying to regenerate the town centre.
Yes.
They're all paying into it, they get a surcharge on the rates, so they're paying money in.
Yes.
And we need to work out how we engage with that. And some of that is, I think, student engagement, because it's very much about the locals.
Yes.
It's about what happens on our high street. And I think if you take a walk down Paisley High Street, we all know it desperately needs some work.
Yes,
because,
but you can also see the student-facing businesses.
You can see the student-facing businesses, and so I think we're looking at how do the university students engage with those businesses? How can we help with our marketing students, with our digital students, with all the with business and enterprise, and introduce them to new techniques? And for me, the focus is very much on the environment and the way that we engage in the town. So it is about the businesses, and same with the Chamber of Commerce, but it's how we link skills development and education to the businesses. Now, colleges, further education colleges, will do that more than we will at the moment, because they are very skills-based. They work very closely with employers to say, what do you need in terms of your engineers. We, because of the kind of courses that we're doing, are maybe not quite at that level. So we're not saying, well, you need, what do your car mechanics need? What do your engineers need? What do your building trade people need in terms of skills? What we can do is say, well, how does that fit into the overall map of the town? How can we as a university have a presence in the town that links people to education, links the businesses to education? And that presence in those groups is really important as a kind of corporate citizen. And that's a big challenge, because it isn't easy to say what the value of that is. So if we send people out to, my team will go out to meetings of these groups, we'll sit on boards of these groups, we'll sit on these things. That isn't directly bringing income in. So it's a challenge for the university, because you can look at that and say, well, okay, having spent 3 years on the Chamber of Commerce board, I probably haven't generated any income as a result of that, and we're under pressure to do that. But the opportunities that will arise from that, the visibility, the way that people will then make connections, is about saying, well, we know the university, we know who to talk to. And so providing a channel in where you're not necessarily doing something practical straight away, but you're generating that relationship. And so then when we have programs in Scotland like Developing the Young Workforce, which is government funded, and which is about making sure that there's a skills pathway for young people. So we are beginning to engage in that in terms of apprenticeships, in terms of how does the university provide opportunities for young people coming into the university to learn a skill. Again, the colleges have been the starting point for that because they're doing the vocational training.
But it's the pathway management.
It's the pathway management. So in a way, it's becoming part of that landscape and saying, what does it mean to be a community university? What does it mean to have a university town? And again, we don't have the answers to this yet. What we're groping towards is we're in 4 towns in Scotland, all of whom are genuinely proud to say we are a university town.
Yes.
But don't actually have an answer yet to what does that mean. You've got a university in the town, you have students in the town, but what does it mean in terms of adding to the sum of the parts in the town to be because it's not like your Oxfords and your Cambridges and your St Andrewses where these are medieval foundations. They've grown up as an integral part of the town.
Indeed.
They are absolutely, they own it apart from anything else in Oxford and Cambridge. So
but if you're thinking about Stoke, you're thinking about Staffs, you're thinking about Bolton.
These are relatively new institutions. They haven't grown up as the town's grown up.
Yeah.
So how do you then become an integral part of something that you didn't start out in? And it's a challenge, and that's where we're beginning to look at partnership.
Indeed, and if you remember, I was originally coming here in January. One of the reasons I've been trying to get to see him for the last few years in Paisley is I wrote that book on city imaging, if you remember, and I looked at the 3rd tier city, the small cities that were often university cities and university towns, and we don't have all the answers yet. That's right, and looking at the modelling and the case studies, of which Paisley is a great example, about how the gown and the town operate.
Absolutely. And one of the things we're beginning to develop within what we're doing here is that beginnings of a vision, which is that there are lots of things happening in the town, community groups, targeting of particular areas, and we are beginning to take ourselves out into those. So, for example, in Paisley, you've got lots of great community projects that are being funded by the local authority, by charitable giving, by the government. And we are wanting to take our place within those and start to provide a link. And some of that is volunteering, some of that is saying how does the university, from a community payback point of view, get into that. Some of that is how do we connect it to our expertise. And some of it is how do we use it to reach the hard to reach groups that we want to reach. So, it's a mutually beneficial arrangement. And we're looking at partnership agreements that will allow us to reach communities that we want to get to. And some of that thinking, and I think this is how it will eventually have an impact on business, but it's community to begin with.
That's right.
Is how do you begin to build up a pathway and an understanding in young people, in kids, that are way off actually being a university student. So we need to start thinking about, preschool and early into primary school and saying, okay, it's a decade or more before they will hit the university. So in funding terms, we're not going to get any funding for them until they become a student and then we start getting funding. But in future thinking terms, how do we start to build an identification with them that means that they have an aspiration, not so much to come here. I mean, great if they come to UWS in 10 years' time, we'd love that. But just to be doing something that develops their aspiration and skills and makes them want opens their vistas, makes them want to be something, to do something with their lives.
Yes.
What we can use our community relationships to do is to reach into those communities. So a good example would be in Paisley we have projects like Street Stuff, and Street Stuff is a project which takes mobile facilities, kids from the area who've grown up through the scheme, run the scheme, and will go back into the community on a regular basis with their buses, and they do street sport, they do football, they do dance, but they also just provide a locus within that community for engagement with the kids by people who've come from that community and understand it. So notwithstanding, where I'm coming from, but at the end of the day, what I'm trying to do is help facilitate these things. I'm a middle-aged guy in a suit, so I don't relate to
very
these
nice
communities.
Suit,
It is, but it doesn't relate to those communities. You need the people who can relate to those communities, who can tell a story. That's not a project, for example, with Street Stuff that we have particularly been involved in up to now. But what we would be able to do with an example like that is take our own developments like Children's University, which aims to work with primary school kids primarily and raise aspiration, and say, right, let's work through the projects that are already there so that we can reach into those communities and roll up with the support of those projects so that there's an introduction there, so that we're now working with the university is coming to give you some kind of delivery of a package of
information
skills, activity that links to a group you're already comfortable with.
Oh, see, this is amazing. And I think what you've done for me there is the word stakeholder, I think, is used too often, and it's used without content. It's an empty signifier. You've just put some lovely content in there for me. For our PhD students who are watching this, how could the word stakeholder help them? What sort of partnerships could they be thinking about, do you think?
I think it's an extension of what I've just been saying, in the sense that there are lots of groups out there who are doing particular things. They might be to do with health and well-being, they might be to do with education, sport, social issues, and actually what the PhD students could be doing is, again, it's about reaching into those communities in a supportive way, because the danger with these things is that you kind of rock up to these groups and say, well, I'm an expert in whatever.
And let me save you.
Let me save you, let me share my wonderfulness with you, which I'm sure they will want. But it's a bit like the same issue as, there's a great story somebody told me about fundraising, where a university, not this one, brought a very, very senior, eminent person in to talk about fundraising and spent an hour and a half giving presentations to them and telling them all the interesting things the university was doing. And at the end of that hour and a half, this very important and rich person said, that was really interesting. Now would you like to know what I'm interested in? And you think, And I think we sometimes have a tendency to do that with the community groups, is go in and say, well, here's what the university does. We do all these things. We're fantastic. We can do this, we can do that, we can do the other. And what you really need to do is say to the groups, what is it that you're trying to achieve and how can we help you achieve it? And you will need to tell them what you do, because they won't understand what you can do.
The possibilities.
But it's a dialogue, and it's much more of a dialogue of, you need to approach it with a degree of humility, which is to say, well, we believe we can do something useful for you, but we need to understand what it is that you're trying to achieve and how we can help. And it might be not what you thought, in the sense of the volunteering that could happen or the research that could happen. But I think the key thing about it is reaching beyond the educational system into these groups, because we certainly have a situation in Scotland at the moment where there's a great emphasis on attainment, and you probably found this from the research at closing what's called the attainment gap, which is kids from less advantaged backgrounds not being as likely to progress to tertiary education, which is, it's not a surprise, I don't think, but it's a common problem around the place. What is being the way that they're addressing that at the moment is to look at performance of schools, putting funding into schools, which is great. We want more funding into schools. The worry that I think I have is that it's actually not the schools that are the issue in the main. The schools are knocking their pans out to try and deliver really good education, but what you need to reach are the actual issues within the community, which might not be about the school, they might be about other elements of the community. And that's where the community groups know their stuff, they know their communities, so they are your gateway into the community, and they can they can tell you what the community needs and help you to deliver it. You can't always deliver it, but I think
it's worth listening.
It's worth listening, and they are all very committed people. They're all very passionate about what they do, and that should be a natural fit for us, because people in universities are passionate about what they do as well.
Exactly. I mean, Gordon, you've heard me say this, the first rule of my teaching career is always talk to people where they are, rather than where you want them to be. And Marie Meredith, one of our PhD students in Alice Springs, the wonderful Alice Springs, when she was doing her research way out bush, she spent a lot of her first few months listening, not involved in her PhD at all really, listening to what the communities had to say rather than what she wanted to impose on them.
Absolutely.
And that's if you're working with Indigenous communities, you're working with all sorts of minoritarian communities, students, citizens of colour. It's understanding their experience, what they want to say to you, rather than the other way around.
Absolutely, and linking that back to your earlier point about the businesses and so on, the chambers, I think that's exactly the challenge there, is that, and we aren't there yet, I'll be honest about that, we're not there that with them.
So few of us are, mate.
Is actually being able to have that dialogue with them, and by listening to them and seeing what they need, I think there are lots of things we can do that they aren't aware of. And one of the lifting the level of that, because I think one of the conversations we have a lot with them is things like, you know, we've got a particular thing we want to do, can we get some students in to help with that? And what I'm forever saying is yes, of course we can, but actually that's a very limiting view of what we can do. So that's like, can we get some marketing students to help us with a website? Yeah, of course we can. But actually, we've got academic expertise. This is where your PhD students come in. We've got academic expertise that can help you to think more deeply about what you're trying to achieve. Not just build you a website, but is a website what you need?
Particularly with the social media.
With the social media, what can we do? And actually, as we raise that up into, you know, an area we've been thinking about but haven't really followed through on yet, is early stage researchers, early career researchers. Can we look to help them do what might be pro bono research? It might not be, you know, funded research to begin with, but there are lots of people out there in these businesses, in small businesses, local communities, who would kill for the support from somebody who's developing their research in different areas, new ideas and that kind of thing, and actually being able to kind of put them out there on a voluntary basis and say, look, we'll give you somebody on a voluntary basis who can help you with this. It'll help their own research and their own development, so that they can move, you know, being mercenary about it from the university's point of view, so they can move to the point where they are bringing in lots of lovely research money because they've developed their profile.
But you can't go from zero to hero.
You can't go from zero to hero. So, you know, let's get that more evolved.
A scaffolding in place.
And it is a dialogue. It's a dialogue about the businesses understanding what we can deliver and us understanding what the businesses want. And sometimes there's probably been an absolute non-meeting of minds there, in the sense of two groups of people talking across purposes and saying, why doesn't the university do more for us? And us saying, well, what is it that you want? You know,
there's the question.
Because, and sometimes, and I think the biggest challenge we have in terms of that kind of dialogue is an assumption, I don't know whether it's the same in Australia, but it's an assumption that universities are big rich institutions and what we're good for is money.
Absolutely.
And I don't know where they get that idea from, because you
turn the paper, the Daily Mail.
They probably get it from the Daily Mail. But you know, there's and you know, fair enough. Certain universities may be in that position.
But we are not.
As one of my colleagues likes to say, we are not cash rich.
We're aspirant
rich, but we're certainly not cash rich. So what we've got is enthusiasm. We've got, you know,
passion, ideas,
location, absolutely. And we're in your community. We're right down the street. How do we bring you in? We haven't helped ourselves in the past, and the big transformation for a university like ours is the breaking down the walls thing. Is the kind of, you know, how do you get into the place? Can you get into the place? Is it for everybody to come into? And we're halfway there. We've created new facilities on this campus in Paisley and on other campuses which are absolutely open to anybody to come into, but they don't particularly, because although we know that they're open, they're not quite getting that word out at the moment, so people still look at the entrances and think, university, you know, whereas we're kind of saying, there's a cafe, come in, have a coffee.
And I was going to say, it is actually incredibly open and beautiful campus. I mean, I got magically lost. I know it'll be a surprise to our PhD students for a couple of hours, and it was just fantastic. It is a very open campus, but it's not about the geography, it's about the mental landscape.
Yeah.
Powerful. The next question I want to ask you is about alumni. Now, I think Scottish universities handle alumni quite well. We had a wonderful alumni colleague in the meeting I was just in. Australian universities, particularly the posh ones, you only hear from the alumni officer when they're after money, and the rest of the time the alumni is not involved. For a PhD student and post-PhD student, what can the alumni do, and what should the alumni PhD relationship be like in aspirant land?
In aspirant land, and in our case it definitely is, this is aspirational because we're at the beginning of a long journey in terms of developing our alumni. For me, we're back to partnership again. The alumni are a community.
Nice.
And what you have to build is you have to build a community and then they're a self-sustaining community. We know this already. I mean, what we've discovered looking around the place is that alumni will tend to form their own communities. So as we've explored our alumni, because pre-merger, pre the creation of the University of Western Scotland, we lost a lot of data. There was a lot of loss of information about the alumni. But what we've discovered going out and looking for it is there are Facebook groups, there are LinkedIn groups, there are
the LinkedIn
class of whatever from, class of 74 from the business school, keeping in touch with each other. So we can tap into that. But the way I think I would see it from a PhD student's point of view is you've got a knowledge base there and you've got a support base there. And again, it's a two-way process. So what you're doing is saying, if we stay in touch with you, then we can provide you with access to research support and to ideas and to, that kind of dynamic dialogue that will help you to develop your business or your activity. By the same token, we can tap into your knowledge from your point of view and say, giving something back isn't all about money. Giving something back might be time, it might be expertise, it might be employment, it might even just be every so often being prepared to look at something and give an opinion on it, or come in and judge a student pitch, or we use alumni for coming and looking at business school enterprise pitches. Stuff like that. The same happens in computing. We have an expert group in computing. It's not all alumni, but a lot of them are alumni. So you can build that relationship. The money will come. We want ultimately people to give us money as well. But that flows from
it's
the community.
It's got to be authentic, I think, and so
absolutely.
often it's just not. Last couple of questions, if I can, Gordon.
Yeah.
Two of our campuses at Flinders are way out. So they're in Alice Springs and they're in Darwin.
Yeah.
1/3 of our students are outside of Adelaide. You can see where this question's going. What are the challenges you think in building a community in a disparate geographical environment, and how do we ensure all our students feel very connected with what we do?
Yeah, it is a huge challenge, and we've kind of got to the point now, I think, where with almost 10 years from our merger, the campuses are, the identity is there as UWS. In a way, it's about recognising that there are different elements to each area. So, our campuses are not identical. They're in different towns, they're in different areas, they have slightly different subject disciplines. Yeah. So it's not pretending, they're all the same, but trying to say, what are the unique aspects of each one, but how do they contribute to the whole? So it's a combination of, you have to have access to the centre, so you have to have, not physical centre, but the kind of intellectual centre. So you have to be able to have mobility between them. So, we have the situation where students can take, for the sake of argument, option modules that might be delivered at another campus.
Lovely.
They have to be able to get there, they have to be willing to get there, but they can do that.
Yes.
We have faculty moving around between the campuses. We try and limit that as much as we can because it's expensive, but we do have people moving around. And the online social media side of it is very important as well. Yeah. And one of the things we've invested in the last few years is, from our corporate comms guys, is that we do have a dedicated social media person now, and he
follow them on Twitter. They're wonderful.
Yeah, and Ross, who does the Twitter feed, the university Twitter feed, is a great guy. He came from a media background. He understands what it takes to build a Twitter feed, and I think the kind of social media environments have to be not too po-faced, and they have to be. You have to get that balance between going too far the other way, but keeping it fun and keeping it engaging, because a lot of the time students don't particularly want to engage with a very formal social media presence. It's light, but they equally don't want you encroaching on their social media domain either. So you don't want them they don't want you right in their Facebook page kind of
down with the young people.
No, that's not. No, that way it's not. That doesn't work for someone like me. But but they so there's a whole range of kind of things. Some of it's in the thought process. I think very early on in UWS, it was just, that there was very much a kind of feeling that we don't want to say, the main campus is X. I mean, there's a reality about the fact that Paisley is the largest campus. So there's a centre of gravity around that in terms of the university's admin. But if you're a student, there isn't, because you are based on whichever campus you're based on. So we might feel, our central admin is here, therefore we gravitate to here, but actually the students don't see it that way, because the students are based on whichever campus they're based on. So the challenge it gives us, and it'll be the same for Flinders, is that, and the figures are worth mentioning.
Yes.
My team's responsible for engagement colleges and local authorities.
Yes.
So throwing out some of the figures there are 9 local authorities within our kind of catchment. We sit in 3 of them, but there are 9 within our geographical area. There are 8 further education colleges that we partner with, which is about, in excess of 24 actual campuses of colleges that my team have to visit.
That is remarkable.
There are 4 NHS trust areas for the hospitals. There are 5 chambers of commerce in the area that we work with, and I have a team of 6, including me. So, the ability to reach all of that is a real challenge, but it's about raising the profile and being contactable. We're not there. We're beginning to be there in certain authorities in certain areas, but I think it's a long-term development to say there has to be a point of contact, there has to be a way that the community comes together with the university. We have to try and make it a meaningful relationship. We're still in some areas a little bit dependent on, the university only raises its profile when we have a problem with student parking, or we have a problem with...
Or a graduation.
Or a graduation, which is always good. And we do, that's another thing about the local identity, in that, our graduations take place in the town halls, and we don't do that on the university premises. In Paisley here, it's in the magnificent Coates Church, which is just behind us here. But in Ayr Town Hall, Hamilton Town Hall, Dumfries, the Crichton Church, it's very much about a local community. So I'm probably rambling away from the purpose of the question.
No.
But the point is that it's a long term. We're celebrating 10 years as UWS next year. That's really just beginning to embed the identity, and I think we're reaching a degree of maturity now in terms of the identity. But then that means we then have to kind of take it further, because one of the challenges you face is that our constituent parts, the predecessor institutions, had identities that people understood. I think the challenge when we became UWS was, what is that identity? Is it the same identity? Is it still about engineering in the case of Paisley University, about other areas like healthcare in the case of Bell College? Yes. How do we actually develop all of that?
And so it's not just branding or rebranding, it's making it deep.
Yeah.
Last question, and it's engaging all the areas of your expertise. You and I both share a love for information literacy. That's Absolutely. How we met. We also both have a deep interest in regional and urban development, so you can see where this question's going. How important is a university like UWS to this region, noting the importance of the closeness to Glasgow, other universities? Yeah. Tell me about universities and regional development.
Well, in 30 seconds.
30 seconds.
Well, I think it's massively important, and I think our kind of university is how we deliver it, because you've got a range of types of university, and I think they're all fantastic. And you've got your ancients, you've got Glasgow and Edinburgh and St Andrews and Aberdeen in Scotland, who are ancient universities, massively good at what they do. Top 10 in the world, some of them. But then you've got the deeply embedded in the community universities, and we are in the latter category. So what we have that they don't is a physical presence in the communities. So we are close to some of the most disadvantaged and deprived communities in Scotland, as well as some of the most affluent. And we can therefore have an impact. I'm not sure that we used to think of it that way. Maybe we did going right back. I think in the early days, pre-university, of places like Paisley Tech, they absolutely were embedded in Paisley, and it was all about Paisley.
And Bolton Institute.
And Bolton Institute would be the same. Yeah. We moved away from that in terms of the creation of universities, and we've seen, I think, a transition where, even in my 8 years at UWS, where initially we were trying to develop a really strong research culture, which we still are, but now I think where we've moved to is that research culture is about the uniqueness of what we do. Yeah. So we're not trying to be Glasgow, we're trying to be us, we're trying to be the community, and I keep talking about community, but international is important to that as well, because the other role we can play that we haven't really talked about this time around, but maybe you'll do in another podcast.
Absolutely.
Is how do we link that local community with the global community?
Trans-local relationships.
Because we can be that link between the two. Indeed. Because we have both ends of that spectrum. So I think the important thing is, how do we develop our role as a major player in the community, as somewhere people can go that should make a difference to people's lives. We're not claiming to be there yet. What I think we're doing is developing that vision through the work that UWS is doing of what does it mean to be a community university linked to a global university.
Yes.
What does it mean to be both? And we're beginning to do the thinking around that says, when we get to the point where our local community should see the benefit, it should be that there's an opportunity given to them that they wouldn't otherwise have.
And of course, I'm talking to your wonderful Dean of your doctoral studies here,
Absolutely.
developing those types of relationships, which will be the next vlog. Carrie, you see why I'm talking to Gordon. There are so many ideas here, so much that we can all do as PhD students, as early career researchers in thinking about our environment. Gordon, I love you. You know I love you. You are an amazing human being. You are an organic intellectual in the Gramscian term. You are an amazing human being, dear friend, wonderful human being. And as always, on behalf of Gordon and myself, I wish you love, light and peace. Gordon, rock and roll.
Thank you.